Today I'm going to show you how to set up back button focusing on your Olympus Pen-F. Okay, so you'd like to set up back button focusing on the Pen-F. You've seen some videos possibly. I'll put a link down below to some of my favorite videos about back button focusing. It's a legitimate technique to have in your photography skill sets, so why not learn how to do that on the Pen-F or set up the Pen-F to do back button focusing. And really, basically, if you're not familiar with back button focusing, all it is you're reprogramming the shutter button. Instead of doing the autofocus lock by half pressing, you're reprogramming one of the other buttons on the camera to do the same thing, thereby releasing the shutter button from that duty to only do maybe auto exposure lock or to only do the release the shutter. So let's go ahead and take a look at the menu on the Pen-F and see how to set up the buttons properly for back button focusing. Now, me personally, I prefer to, let's go into the menu. And we'll scroll down to the button dial menu. And we'll go into button function. And these are all of the buttons you can program on the Pen-F. And the button I'm going to program is this magnify button on the back, just for namesake. And what I was going to say earlier is I prefer to program the front depth of field preview button, this one right here, to do back button focusing. Just ergonomically, it's easier for me rather than holding the camera and trying to reach down to this magnify button. And if you have bigger hands or longer fingers, you can reprogram this function 2 button or the function 1 button, any button you want really that's on this menu. So let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to click right, and we're going to change this to AEL-AFL, which stands for auto exposure lock / autofocus lock, and click OK. And that's not the only thing you need to do actually, because you'll notice when I'm half pressing the shutter, it's still locking focus on whatever point I select. You need to do one more thing. So let's go back into the menu, go back out, and we need to go into the autofocus manual focus menu and scroll down to the AEL-AFL button or menu item. And you'll see here there's 3 selections: single point autofocus, continuous autofocus, and manual focus. So if you're in single point autofocus mode, and that's usually when you're going to be using back button focusing, you want to program this magnify button to do the autofocus locking. And right now you can see in mode 1 the halfway press shutter is still programmed to do auto exposure single point autofocus, and then fully pressing is for the lock that exposure and take the picture. But the AEL-AFL button right now, which is the magnify button, is programmed just to do auto exposure lock. So let's go ahead and change that, and you can do that by going into mode 3. And you can see mode 2 here, the shutter is still doing single point autofocus, and it's not doing the auto exposure lock until you fully press the shutter. But in this mode, now the halfway pressing the shutter does the auto exposure lock, and fully pressing is basically taking the picture. And the AEL-AFL button will now do single point autofocus and lock focus on whatever you're programming. So we'll click OK, and I'm not going to worry about it. You can do the same things for the other 2 modes here, focusing modes. So let's go back out. So now you'll notice when I'm pressing the shutter button halfway, nothing's happening. I can select that point, nothing's happening. What I did is you've programmed the magnify button to focus on whatever point you choose. And that's pretty much it. Now that the shutter button is set for auto exposure lock, sometimes what you can do is set your metering to spot metering, point the camera up at the sky, half press the button, shutter button to expose for the sky or the highlights, and then come back down, back button focus on whatever you want, your subject, and then fully press the shutter at that point and take the picture. So that's one of the simple uses for exposure or back button focusing. I'll put a link down below to some pretty good video about using back button focusing in different situations. And like I said, it's a legitimate technique to have in your skill set. But that's it to back button focusing, just like that. Okay, so hopefully you like this video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'm going to try and do some more videos as usual on the Pen-F and how to use some of the features or reprogram it to be a little bit more similar, or take advantage of features that maybe are kind of buried in the menu and bring them out front back to the dials that you can use them. So thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.